Joining me now is one of the top-tier frontrunners in this race, Dr. Ben Carson. He's joining me now this morning from Georgia. Dr. Carson, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Good to be with you again.
I want to start with a criticism of you that Bill Kristol writes, and it actually is something I've heard from other conservatives who like you but are concerned about whether you're ready to be president. Bill Kristol writes this: "Did you watch the debate? Neither Trump nor Carson has much of a grasp of the issues. Carson is a Christian gentleman and a genuine conservative, but he is not yet prepared to be president, and he'd have to show an awful lot of growth to be ready a year from now." What do you say to Bill Kristol and other conservatives who like you but are concerned you're not ready for the job?
I would say listen to what I actually say when I have an opportunity to say it in something other than a 1-minute soundbite.
Well,
that's a format that I have to grow accustomed to. That's not the world that I've lived in. But the time will come down the road where I'll be able to adjust to that appropriately.
You said something interesting to Hugh Hewitt when you were asked about, when he was asking to you about your readiness to be president, and you told him this: if you go to a very well-run hospital, you're going to have a president of the hospital or chief administrator. He probably doesn't know a whole lot about cardiac surgery, probably doesn't know a whole lot about neurosurgery or pediatric infectious disease, but he knows how to put together a structure where the strength of all those departments work effectively. So in essence, do you view the presidency as something that you need to be a good manager where you don't necessarily have to have a full command of all policy issues?
Well, I think you need to have a very substantial command, but it's sort of like me as a neurosurgeon. I know a great deal about the brain, but if I have a patient who has a kidney problem, I also know a lot about the kidney, but I don't know as much as a renal specialist does, and therefore I would get a consult.
What would you point to in your resume to anybody that asks you about your readiness to say, you know what, this is what I believe prepares me best for the presidency?
I would say a combination of dealing with a lot of extraordinarily complex issues, solving problems that had never been solved before in a complex field, spending decades in corporate America, learning the ins and outs of efficiency in business, starting a national nonprofit that has won 2 national awards that are only given to one organization in the country out of tens of thousands. And living a life in which I've had an opportunity to experience virtually every socioeconomic level, multiple types of jobs, interacting with the people, and feeling what the people feel.
I want to move to foreign policy. You said something interesting at the debate that I'd not heard before. You said that when the issue of the Iraq War occurred in 2003, you said this, quote, "I suggested to President Bush that he not go to war. And I just wanted that on the record." When did you do that? In what forum did you tell President Bush not to do this?
That was after 9/11, and I wrote him a letter and subsequently had a chance to speak with him. And I said, you have an opportunity to become the greatest president in history because right now the people are united behind you. And just do a Kennedy-esque move. When the Russians got ahead of us in the space race, he used the bully pulpit to galvanize the energies of academia and business and industry behind a plan to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely. I said, if you said within 10 years we will be petroleum independent, and there was some resolve behind that, I guarantee you that the moderate Arab states would be terrified and they would turn over Osama bin Laden or anybody else you wanted on the silver platter.
It sounds like you believe President Bush missed a moment right after 9/11?
Well, that was my opinion. Now, I've talked to President Bush many times, and I can tell you, he was extremely dedicated to keeping the American people safe. That was by far his #1 priority, and he didn't care what anybody thought about him. He wanted to make sure that we were safe, and I admire him for that.
Recently, you were talking about in dealing with ISIS that you said you would be going after them with ground troops in Iraq, but you would not go into Syria. Why?
Well, first of all, what I said is I would use every resource available to us. That includes financial resources, covert operations, special forces, everything that we have available to us, and if that required ground troops, we would use those as well, because it's unlikely that a coalition will form behind nothing. In terms of going into Syria, I think you have to have sequential goals. One of the goals right now is to push them out of Iraq, which is the largest part of the caliphate that they have established. This is what makes them look very powerful. They also control Anbar, and that's one of the largest energy fields in the Middle East. Push them out of there. Don't allow them to have control of that. And I would be in favor of pushing them up into Syria because there's going to be a lot of conflict, obviously, with them there. Let them fight each other. Because that's a very complex situation in Syria. You have the Russians coming in there now and establishing themselves. You have the Chinese starting to establish some contacts there. You want to be very, very careful before you jump into the middle of that situation.
It's interesting. There does seem to be a split in this field. So you're one of those that says, you know what, let Assad and ISIS fight it out amongst themselves and then wait to see what happens and then clean up the mess later?
That is something that would certainly be on the agenda to consider.
You brought up Russia very quickly. You have some very stark language about Vladimir Putin on your website. You said this: President Putin must come to learn that there will be grave and serious consequences when Russia engages in naked aggression against other sovereign nations and free people. All options should remain on the table when dealing with international bullies such as President Putin. You just brought up Russia getting into Syria. Is that one of those cases where they're being, that's a naked aggression on the part of Russia?
Well, they're not. They claim that they're not being aggressive there at all. And they say we shouldn't read too much into what they're doing there. But I was referring more to, what they've done with Ukraine, what they've done with Georgia, what they've done with Crimea. They're really the only reason I believe that they haven't moved further is because of the low prices of energy, because he's sort of a one-horse show, energy. And we ought to take advantage of that, recognizing that we could really contain him significantly on the energy front. And we have an enormous amount of energy here, but we still have these archaic energy exportation laws on the books from the 70s. We don't need that.
May wrap this up by finally dealing with what's been going on, Donald Trump, and I deal with a questioner that claimed that the president was Muslim. Let me ask you the question this way. Should a president's faith matter? Should your faith matter to voters?
Well, I guess it depends on what that faith is. If it's inconsistent with the values and principles of America, then of course it should matter. But if it fits within the realm of America and consistent with the Constitution, no problem.
So do you believe that Islam is consistent with the Constitution?
No, I don't. I do not. I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
And would you ever consider voting for a Muslim for Congress?
Congress is a different story, but it depends on who that Muslim is and what their policies are, just as it depends on what anybody else is, And if there's somebody who's of any faith, but they say things and their life has been consistent with things that will elevate this nation and make it possible for everybody to succeed and bring peace and harmony, then I'm with them.
And I take it you believe the president was born in the United States and is a Christian?
I believe that he is. I have no reason to doubt what he says.
All right. Dr. Carson, I will leave it there. I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.